today's reading from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 6, verses 30 to 34 and 53 to 56. As soon as I can find it. The apostles returned and met with Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. There were so many people coming and going that Jesus and his disciples didn't even have time to eat. So he said to them, "Let us go off by ourselves to some place where we will be alone, and you can rest for a while." So they started out in a boat by themselves for a lonely place. Many people, however, saw them leave and knew at once who they were. So they went from all the towns and ran ahead by land and arrived at the place ahead of Jesus and his disciples. When Jesus got out of the boat, he saw this large crowd, and his heart was filled with pity for them, because they were so like sheep without a shepherd. So he began to teach them many things. They crossed the lake and came to the land at Gennesaret, where they tied up the boat. As they left the boat, people recognized Jesus at once. So they ran throughout the whole region, and wherever they heard he was, they brought to him sick people lying on their mats. And everywhere Jesus went, to villages, towns, or farms, people would take those who were ill to the marketplaces and beg him to let them at least touch the edge of his cloak. And all who touched it were made well. And this is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Yeah, you do it. The lectionary. You know, the details are in New Wave every week. A programme of recommended readings for each Sunday. There's usually a psalm, something out of the Old and the New Testament, and a Gospel, which is within the programme normally read together with other readings if so desired. The programme runs for 3 years and then repeats itself ad infinitum. It's tempting to dig out a sermon from 3 or 6 years past and repeat it and see if anyone remembers. Good discipline. Sometimes the subject seems ideal for a sermon, but at other times you feel you've rather drawn the short straw. What can you make from it? Now, this week's Gospel reading focused on the unsuccessful efforts of Jesus and his followers to find a quiet, peaceful place where they can relax. It didn't seem to hold a good message. That's what I thought at first. But as is so often the case, if you delve a bit into what is happening and why, it opens up. And there is something very positive to say, or hopefully what God is trying to say to us. I woke up. 2 o'clock in the morning it was, and I was wide awake, and an idea or two were floating around my mind about today's message. "Okay, Lord, I'll write it down tomorrow morning," I said. But it doesn't work that way. By morning, those ideas are gone, or at best lukewarm. So I wrote at 2 a.m. till something well after 3, and then back, hopefully, to the land of Nod. So today's message is based on the thoughts in my mind in the middle of the night. Scribbling them down at that hour was surprising. Meant a lot to me. Those events of over 2,000 years ago came to life in a new and unexpected way. Sharing this may bring some new life and perspectives to you, I hope. So just imagine you're there with Jesus and his followers, or maybe Jane has travelled on a time machine to write a report for New Wave. They're tired, all of them. So much has been happening, so much is new in their lives. They've gone away from their old routines, their normal lives as they were, and followed Jesus, heard his message, spoken to great crowds of people, and sometimes just to them. They've seen healings, changes in people's lives, miracles. Well, everyone wants miracles, don't they? A man born to be king, to put the world to rights, with them in the best positions. That's what they think. Isn't it very often still the same? Let's find somewhere quiet and peaceful, says Jesus. Somewhere we can rest, get our strength back. You can imagine the scene, can't you? Simon Peter speaks out. I know just the place, he says. Leave it with me. I'll steer the right course. You'll see. And off he goes. But it doesn't happen. They're seen. People follow on foot, on boat, or maybe on camel or donkey even. This quiet place of Peter's is full of people, great crowds of them. 5,000 they say, and that's only the men. Maybe 15,000, including women and children. I wonder who did the count. Matthew probably, he's a numbers man, isn't he? All of them expecting inspiration and healing, and of course, miracles. So what does Jesus say? What does he do? He looks at the crowds. He looks at his followers and say, they'll be hungry. Feed them. They look at each other in horror. Feed them? Us? What with? You've got to be joking. Can you imagine if this was today's world? You call in at Macca's, 15,000 Big Macs, please, and 15,000 Cokes. Or perhaps at Woolies, 5,000 cooked chooks and 3,000 loaves of bread. Oh, and 15,000 Cokes as well. They won't have all that food and drink. And anyway, where's the money coming to pay for it? Tell us that, Master. Jesus sighs. He looks at the people waiting expectantly, and a boy comes up to Jesus with his picnic in his hands, some fish and some bread, and he gives it to Jesus unasked. And somehow everybody gets fed, and there's even leftovers. How? Another miracle, they say? Food out of nothing? But is it? Could it be that the people followed the example of the boy and shared what they had? Some with plenty, others a little, some with nothing at all. Is it a miracle then of provision, or a miracle of sharing? What do you reckon? Then, when they are fed, it's time for Jesus' ministry. And later, in today's reading, they search for another quiet place. But yet again, it's packed with people just waiting for Jesus, so no rest for them there. Back across the water, all exhausted. Jesus goes to sleep. A storm blows up suddenly, a nasty one. The experienced fishermen on board are used to storms on Lake Galilee. They I've seen it happen. I was there and a storm suddenly blew up and then it stopped again. And it happens. But this time there was a storm and it was a nasty one. And the experienced fishermen are used to these storms, but this time they've lost it. They're so tired, they can't cope. You know the feeling? Help! We're gonna sink. Save us, Jesus. Where is he? He's asleep, curled up under a rug. And they wake him. Jesus walks down the boat, grumbling about their lack of faith. Why don't they understand? He faces the stormy waters, raises his hands, "Be still," he shouts. And the waters are still, and they are all safe. Yet another miracle. Jesus even controls the waves. But I wonder, is that it? Does Jesus really control the waves and command them to be still, and so they are still? Is it a miracle of deliverance? Or perhaps does Jesus restore confidence in his followers so they all work together as a team and steer and control the boat and ride through the rough waters? Might it be a miracle of teamwork, of pulling together as they have in the past? Deliverance or togetherness? Which do you reckon would be the greater miracle? Which one do we, you and I, what do we need? Jesus muttering about their lack of faith and not understanding. I've always thought that's a bit hard. After all, they seem to have faith in Jesus to take control and save them all. Isn't that what it's all about? What is Jesus saying? What is the message for us? Is it dream the impossible dream? Feed the millions in this world who lack the very basics of what we consider to be essential? Make it a fairer world? Fight and come through the savage storms of life and come out on top? And Jesus doesn't say, I'll do it. He says, you do it. For them, over 2,000 years ago, and for us now. We pray to God, heal the sick, feed the hungry, turn aggression into peace. Yes, we're right to pray this way, and God listens and says, you do it. Live God's way. Love God, and love your neighbour as yourself. Have faith in God and in your own God-given ability and willingness to live God's way. At this stage of my early morning writing, with a couple of sentences left for the ending, I finished and went back to sleep. Now just a few more thoughts from the daylight. Many of us have taken courses in the ministry of caring. As I see it, the essentials in caring are not giving wise, sensible advice, but listening. A word or two here and there to help the person keep on until they have told their story, they have shared their problems and hopefully found their own solution. Very often in caring, they'll thank you for the wise and helpful advice which they think you've given. But you haven't. You have listened and helped them to find their own way. Is that perhaps what prayer is all about? Many years ago in England, Rotary sponsored games for the visually impaired at Stoke Mandeville Hospital, which hospital had been set up at the end of the Second World War for rehabilitation of those wounded during the war. And it expanded and grew and eventually was the instigator of the Paralympics. 8 of our club went along to the games, along with one competitor from our town. And it was amazing. People who can't see, or they can only just see a little bit, competing in athletic events, running races, a long jump, lawn bowls, and more. In the sprints, it was one runner at a time, with the coach at the far end calling out 4, 4, 4, 4, 3, 3, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 4, and so on. 4 was the middle lane, and the coach's call indicated which lane they were running in, so they could adjust and run as fast as possible and as straight as possible. And of course they were timed. And if someone went off track, well, there was always another race, another time. And in the track runs, round the track, athletes with just a little bit of sight were linked to a seeing person, and they ran together. For the long jump, a bell sounded 2 strides from the jump. Our local competitor, he didn't win anything, but he was so excited, and he went home and formed a new athletics club for the local visually impaired. Very special. Seems to me this is a bit like Jesus saying, you do it. Jesus is there to help and guide us impaired runners in the race of life. We need Jesus, but equally Jesus needs us to do the things that need doing in our world in God's way. We all need help in some way, don't we? We all need good mateship. We all need to help one another as a team, in its fully sense, not a holy huddle, making a difference, or perhaps the difference, in the way Jesus shows and tells us, from his position in the boat on Galilee, at the end of the track, all running alongside us, maybe all 3 bonded together. Finally, back to those last words of that early morning. When we're tired, exhausted, struggling, not coping well, do you know, often that's the times when you and I are most needed, are most called upon. Time to take it to God, to ask for help, and then do it yourself. You and me, all of us. Feed the hungry, heal the sick, care for the downhearted, make peace. An old 60s slogan, you remember, was make love, not war. Often misinterpreted in a rather different way, but when you think about it, it's right, isn't it? Amen. Now to sing, and James last week, 2 of his hymns from last week I've got today, and I was quite worried at one time because I thought, oh dear, is he doing the same sermon? Funnily enough, what he had last week, it seemed to run into this one in a sense. So, here we go. This is a lovely one. I, the Lord of sea and sky, let me see. Here I am.